The campaign of Vice President Joe Biden has just admitted that he was being less than honest about his visit to South Africa to see Nelson Mandela. Now, Biden's 2020 campaign has come out to say that the former vice president was actually not arrested for trying to visit Nelson Mandela at a South African prison during apartheid. That's after Biden used that or had claimed that at least 3 times in the run up to South Carolina. In fact, I want to give you some of that speech. Take a look.
Nelson Mandela walked out of prison and entered into discussions about apartheid. I had the great honor of meeting him. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador on the streets of Soweto trying to get to see him on Robbins Island. When he came to the United States, when he came to the White House, to the Senate, I was chairman of the committee, and he walked in, and most incredible thing I've ever felt in my life. He walked across in that private room with the big table we have in the executive room, and he walked over, and I said, Mr. President, he leaned, I said, thank you.
Okay, so, wow. That was Joe Biden. Now, in multiple campaign visits to Nevada and South Carolina, Biden made those same comments, right? Those same claims, despite having no publicly available evidence of it. Meaning it never happened. He made it up. Now, the New York Times and the Washington Post, people who would arguably be more on Biden's side, also looked into it, and they're like, yeah, we don't have any sort of evidence to support that story. No, he did not get arrested. Now, this, not only that, but this was not even mentioned in Biden's 2007 memoir. You think that getting arrested with Nelson Mandela would be something that you would put in your memoirs, right? Like, oh man, remember that time I got arrested with Nelson Mandela? That was kind of awesome, also terrible. But hey, it was awesome. And look at me fighting against apartheid with one of the greats. Well, again, it didn't really happen. So, look, I don't know if he's. I'm not even sure what's going on. Is he lying? Yes, but maybe his brain's also melting. I don't know what's going on with Joe Biden. But again, this isn't the first time he's lied about something, to be fair. And it's not a good look, right? Now, not only did Biden not get arrested when he was in South Africa, but it wouldn't even make sense for him to have gotten arrested in the first place. Like, what did he do? And the whole story doesn't make sense because the city of Soweto is hundreds of miles away from the island where Mandela was. So, I mean, getting arrested to go and see Mandela when you were nowhere near Mandela makes no sense. Makes no sense. So now the campaign comes back and says, oh, yeah, okay, look, that didn't happen. Here's what actually happened. He was separated from a congressional delegation at an airport. Well, that is a far cry from getting arrested. I'm just saying, right? Now, this is Kate Bedingfield, Biden's communication director, who told reporters on Wednesday that, well, look, he was separated, right? Quote, he took a trip with the congressional delegation back in the 1970s. He was separated from the Congressional Black Caucus members as he was traveling with at the airport when he landed. So the whole thing was, since they were undergoing apartheid, they had black doors and white doors. And so in order to go through the black doors, obviously, it was only like black people had to go through the black doors. White people had to go through the white doors. So Biden, not a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, obviously, separated from the group to go through the white door. And that, I mean, that's already terrible, right? So that is the damage of apartheid. Separate is never equal, right? And so if you just tell that story, like, hey, I went to South Africa, we wanted to visit Nelson Mandela to, talk about his imprisonment and to really fight against this evil of apartheid. And when I was there, I had to be separated from my delegation because they were black, I was white. And there firsthand, I could see the pain in the faces of those that I traveled with being segregated and separated. And it just, makes me, just think about just the horrors that normal everyday black people go through in this terrible racist system that is set up here in South Africa. That would have actually been a very powerful story. But he didn't share that story. Why he felt compelled to lie about getting arrested. I mean, ridiculous. Ridiculous. All right, so now, more details on Biden back in the 70s, right? And they're not good. In fact, when he was in the 70s, instead of getting arrested visiting Nelson Mandela, he was compromising with segregationists in America. Now, he actually did take a trip to South Africa, but also that's around the same time that he was supporting people like Strom Thurmond. Now, Biden legislatively led the charge in an issue that kept black students segregated from white students in Delaware. Now, his legislative work against school integration, according to NBC News, advanced a more palatable version of the separate but equal doctrine and undermined the nation's short-lived efforts at educational equality, said legislative and education history experts. So, I mean, hey, it's the nicer version of apartheid here in America. Now, Biden also sponsored a bill limiting the Delaware court's power after it had ruled on the issue of busing. Now, they ruled in favor of using busing to integrate schools. Joe Biden said, I don't like the court's ruling, and I'm working on behalf, of course, white people, right? And so we don't like that. Strom Thurmond doesn't like that. And so I'm going to try to blunt the court's power so that we don't have to do busing. Not only did he support that bill, but he also added an amendment, right, to an appropriations bill that barred the federal government from withholding funding from schools that remained segregated. That amendment went beyond busing, by the way, affecting school systems that effectively separated students by race, whether or not they used busing. That is disastrous, but that is his record. Not only did he lie about the arrest, but also about Mandela personally thanking him for getting arrested, because again, it never actually happened. Now, Ms. Bedingfield could only say that Mandela had thanked the former vice president for his anti-apartheid work, more broadly, but not in any specific incident. And so, look, Biden, he actually did fight against issues of apartheid, but he was also doing something similar at home in fighting for separate but equal and to keep these schools segregated. At least maybe, to be the most kind to him, saying, well, I don't agree with the way that they did it, but I agree with the goal. And so I was against the way that they did it, again, to be super, super kind, right? Now, as for the supposed arrest, right, getting back to that, Biden's communication director was clear that the incident should be referred to as separation. Now, the U.S. ambassador to the UN from 1977 to 79 was also there, right? And it was claimed that he also got arrested with Biden. He said, I don't recall being arrested. I was never arrested, and I don't think he was either, Mr. Young told the New York Times. I don't think there's ever a situation where congressmen were arrested in South Africa. Jesus, man. I mean, really? Is there any wonder why Joe Biden continues to lose every primary contest he's ever been in? I mean, seriously, every time somebody, all they have to do is just look up the past, look up actual records. We have the internet now, and Biden, for whatever reason, still thinks that it doesn't exist, that you can't just go and look up actual information and say, hey, wait a minute, I think you're lying about this. No kidding. And look, his record His record on race is mixed at best. But that's not even the worst part. Is he's going around lying about it. And yet, this is a man who just today got the endorsement of Jim Clyburn. Now, Jim Clyburn is a very important figure in South Carolina, very important civil rights icon. And yet, Clyburn gives his endorsement to Joe Biden, saying, I know Joe Biden. Well, if you knew Joe Biden, then surely you would know about this. I think Clyburn should know better because, and I'm not saying Clyburn shouldn't endorse Bernie Sanders, right? No, I'm saying that maybe he should know this kind of stuff. And maybe he does, and maybe he's forgiven, and maybe he's a better person than I am. Maybe I have no doubt. But I don't know. I guess people who have my respect, by the way, Jim Clyburn is somebody worthy of respect for, what he's been doing to fight for racial justice. But even those people who have done great and wonderful things can still do things that make, to me, at least no sense. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a patreon.com/TYTNation set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.